First, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. Thanks for joining us. We are live streaming here out of the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom. I always like to remind everybody of that, so no matter when or where you're watching, we are live, but you can always watch after the fact as well on those Fox 12 Oregon apps. And we cover a wide range of topics on this show, but right now we're going to talk about an exhibit and something that you can go witness and experience yourself at OMSI, the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry. And this new exhibit is actually celebrating the Nez Perce. And on top of that, tribes and native organizations from around the region just to celebrate the history and the culture that is. And we've got a lot more that goes into that. Of course, heads and hearts, excuse me, as you can see there on your screen. But this is really encompassing a lot more than even just that. And we're going to talk about that right now. We've got Ellen Bishop joining us here. And Ellen, thank you very much for being here and being a part of this show. And
it's my pleasure.
Yeah, and this topic, you know, it's something that's just very important, I think, for a lot of people to understand. But I think to start off, you know, I'd love to know just a little bit about you and your association with this, and maybe to give everybody an overview of what it is that we're talking about with this exhibit.
Sure. Well, the exhibit is about ethnogeology, which is basically understanding how the stories, observations, and experiences of Indigenous peoples basically can contribute to science. So it's kind of like ethnobotany, only with rocks.
I love that, and understanding that history and knowledge. So when we talk about that, understanding the history and the science and associated with Indigenous peoples, you know, where do we begin here, I guess, in explaining that to everybody and explaining this exhibit and what people can see as part of that?
Well, my colleague Roger Ammerman, who can't be here today, and myself are both geologists and artists. So I do my art through photography, and he does more hands-on art. But both of us realized that the stories told by Indigenous people, and particularly the Nez Perce, because Roger is part of the Nez Perce reservation system. His family is Nez Perce. And I've worked in Northeast Oregon for a long time and gotten to know Nez Perce people and heard their stories and realized that those stories, many of those stories, are connected with geological events that those people who've been here for at least 16,000 and probably as many as 20,000 years were actually firsthand observers of. Those events include the Ice Age floods that roared down the Columbia River Gorge and washed across Washington. They include the Great Cascadia Subduction Zone earthquakes, not so much of the Nez Perce saw, but other tribes witnessed them. They include eruptions like the eruption of Mount Mazama that created a huge pall on the landscape for the Nez Perce and is enshrined in some of their stories. So these are not just myths. These are stories that include real life observations, and they're told in stories that are told by sort of dedicated families of storytellers who keep those stories accurate and the same down through generation to generation to generation to generation. So geologists, I think, can learn a lot by understanding these stories, looking at them, and taking them seriously as firsthand observations of things that oftentimes geology has to piece together from other evidence.
Which is really amazing. You know, when you look at this region in particular, this region in particular is so geologically active as far as earthquakes, volcanoes. You know, there's a lot happening here. So how do you take some of that scientific data that maybe you've, gathered through observation in like the actual land and compare those to the stories to match those up?
Well, let's take the story of the tsunamis, for example. What geologists and seismologists can begin to understand from those stories is the extent of the tsunami invasion of the landscape. They can have a feel for how much shaking actually occurs during an earthquake in a sandy zone or a zone that's potentially would have some subsidence. They can tell the difference between the intensity of an earthquake on the southern coast versus one on the northern coast. I mean, remember, these are quakes that have occurred repeatedly over thousands of years, every 500 to 300 years. And so those stories repeat and encapsulate the experiences of people who lived on the coast.
And so when you're hearing those stories, is this something where you can look at a specific region, say the coastal region or the Nez Perce or whatever area it is, and understand that their stories correlate to that specific geographic or geological event?
Correct. For example, the tsunami, the last one on January 6, 1700, occurred, we think, at 9 p.m. on January the 6th, 1700. But the coastal tribe stories tell of an earthquake that occurred at night in the winter. And so you would have at least a start there of thinking about when that earthquake occurred. By the same token, we've always wondered about what time of year, for example, did Mount Nezama erupt? And again, you can go to indigenous stories and see how the ashfall impacted the plants and the people living there. The Nez Perce have stories about that.
Amazing. And of course, that's Crater Lake, right? Mount Mazama.
Crater Lake, right.
Yeah. Yeah. So being able to correlate those stories to that. What's it been like, working with the indigenous organizations, whatever that may be, tribes, organizations of all kinds, to, correlate this and from the scientific, standpoint to the storytelling standpoint and their history?
Yeah, well, we've worked primarily with Nez Perce and their related tribes, Cayuse and Umatilla, and Yakima peoples. And their stories also document Ice Age floods. So we can actually sit and talk with some elders in that landscape and have them tell the stories of, let's say, Old Man Fishing Rock, where the Nez Perce, near Lewiston, where the Nez Perce would have taken refuge on top of a very, very high pinnacle above the Snake River. So the story basically tells that there were different levels of floods. The old man who was fishing there could fish at very high floods. He could fish at medium floods. He could fish at low floods. So it's and that correlates with evidence that the Nez Perce see themselves in where there are rounded river rocks high above the river level today.
Amazing. And all of these are essentially oral stories that are passed down. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. Yes. The Nez Perce and most indigenous North American tribes have oral traditions as opposed to written traditions. And so, in order to keep those stories the same, they have to ensure that they're told the same way, generation after generation.
How important is this for the general public to have this understanding of, the historical aspect of these stories that are being shared, given them a current context, I guess?
Well, I think it's really critical, and because we tend to think of indigenous stories as cute stories about coyote, or cute stories about, two men and two women, or cute stories about a landslide and volcanoes throwing fire at one another. That would be the Bonneville landslide. And yet they are not. They're actually embedded within those stories. There is scientific reality. It's like Nez Perce elder Alan Pinkham said, these are actually what you might call mythical truths. They're told as a story because we need characters to tell a story. But there's truth in that story. So you need to have a plot, you need to have Coyote doing something, but the end product is that Coyote is telling you about a flood, or he's telling you about an eruption, or he's telling you about an earthquake.
Amazing. And bringing those worlds together like that. And this is something that when people go there to this exhibit, so to give everyone that idea, when they come down to visit, heads and hearts at OMSI. What is that experience like walking through it?
Well, it's a beautiful exhibit. The panels are stunning. The stories are there and easy to read. And along with each story, there is the geologic interpretation of that story, geologic understanding of that story, so that people can actually read the story and then look at the geologic sort of truth that's there, and then go back and kind of try to understand how that story conveys that truth. I mean, not all Indigenous stories certainly are about geologic events, but there are some that are about those, and those are little pieces of treasure for geologists.
Amazing. Well, Ellen, I want to say thank you, very much for joining us just to talk about this. I'm looking forward to seeing this myself, and I love learning about history and having this tie into the science and geology of it as well. Just really fantastic to bring those two worlds together and just see how it's all tied in. It's all tied together.
It is. Yeah, everything is tied together, actually.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, it really is.
Well,
Anything else?
This is
Yeah,
great.
thank you very much for joining us, and looking forward to seeing that. And thanks for all of your work. Everybody on the team for working to put this together.
All right. Thank you very much, Greg.
Thanks. And for everybody watching, this is Fox 12 Now. As I mentioned, we live stream here out of the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom. And while we are live streaming, you can watch these after the fact as well on the Fox 12 Oregon apps. And feel free to share these, let other people know about them. We get to have longer form discussions like we just did with Ellen to find out more about something, really unique that's happening there as far as learning about this all in one place there at OMSI, which is has a number of amazing exhibits that come through there. So thanks for joining us. We have plenty more here this afternoon. So between 1 and 4 p.m. I'm here every day. Right now we're right about 3 o'clock. We've got more coming up in this next hour. So we will talk to you soon with more. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now.